Welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business, as we continue in Module 7 with our exploration of the topic of operations, production. In this particular video, what we're looking at is the topic of scheduling. Scheduling is really the art of making sure that all the resources you need for production show up on time. This is one of the most crucial parts of operation, not simply making sure that the raw materials and the processes are in place, but they are scheduled in such a way as to deliver product where it needs to be exactly on time. This is a very, very difficult discipline. This is one of the areas where management really needs to be on top of their game, and there are concepts and tools we'll take a look in this video to help that along. So the first thing we take a look at when we think of operations scheduling is that operations works based upon a master schedule. The master schedule is the Big Daddy calendar, the game plan for all of upcoming production. And so from the master schedule derives all sorts of detailed schedules showing detailed day-to-day activities, how each specific step will take, when are resources needing to be allocated where, including not only raw materials but labor hours, and therefore how do you schedule personnel to come into production at what hours, on what shifts, and those kinds of things. But the point here is that all of that is driven by a master production schedule. And so we talk about a master production schedule. Here is an example, at least a partial example, from the textbook, figure 7.9. And you can see here, this is a electrical coil manufacturer. And so you can see here part of their master schedule are production delivery dates for at least 3 different types of coil products. You see them there in the left-hand column. They are identified by product numbers, TC 016, 032, and TR 020, and the quantities that are to be produced on what particular dates. And so you can see there in August they'll be planning to produce 1,500 units of TC 016, while only 300 units of TR 020, which will then change significantly by the time you get to August 18th, where you can see no production of TC 016 and significantly increased production on the other 2 products. Now, the point here is that this production schedule, this master operation schedule of production, will drive all of the other smaller decisions that lead up to and are necessary to be made in order to produce these units on time. The next slide here, you see here another example from the textbook, figure 7.10, a food retailer's partial ops schedule. And you can see here, right, their operation schedule is based upon the number of stores, and therefore in a grocery store, a food retailer, right, what is the staff needed, the number of staff needed, and therefore from there you'll also drive down to what? The tonnage of fresh vegetables, the number of canned goods, etc., right? And that's planned out from month to month so that they can then, of course, derive other schedules, ordering schedules for vegetables, as well as labor and staffing schedules for staff, right? And so you can imagine how each of those detailed day-to-day operational schedules are driven by the master. So, some of the ways that we look at this in terms of more detailed scheduling: there are staff schedules identifying who and how many employees will be working and when. And you may be familiar with that. If you know, in your first couple of jobs, perhaps you were working somewhere as labor, either in a retail establishment or a food production establishment or something like that, you may be very, very familiar with working on a schedule. And so the scheduler would slot you for particular shifts, and you may find over time there are particular shifts or roles that you prefer, and so you were trying to pal up to or negotiate with the scheduling person to give you the shifts that you really preferred, and those kinds of things. Very, very common, right? Versus project schedules. You see there in the blue there. which coordinate completing large-scale projects. And that's really where the next couple of slides we look at in this deck, in this particular video lecture, have to focus on project scheduling. So you can see here there are two primary tools that I've actually used in my career to handle large-scale project scheduling. The first is the Gantt chart. The production scheduler breaks down large projects into discrete steps to be performed and specifies the time required to perform each step. And then there is also the Pert chart, a production schedule specifying the sequence of activities, time requirements, and critical path challenges for performing the steps in a particular project. Let's take a look at these one at a time. This is an example of a Gantt chart. This particular chart is for a project, let's say a one-time project of revamping a classroom. And so you're going to redo the floor and rework some of the tables and the chairs that are installed. And so you can see here how this works. If you start, you notice that on the horizontal axis, it runs by dates from April 13th to June 22nd. And then in the upper left-hand corner, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to get funding approval. And you see there that this particular Gantt chart gives you from April 13th to April 20th, a week to secure funding approval. The next step after that, you see it just in sequential fashion, right? Step B, remove the chairs and tables from the room. That will take, you can see by the length of the bar, a very short amount of time, right? And then from there, the next step is to go and buy new floor tiles, right? Now, you can see here that is just been completed by the current date indicated at the top there, but you sort of see here how each of those things are shown in sequence. And the beauty of a Gantt chart, having used a Gantt chart, is that it visually displays where you are actually at in the project. You can tell very quickly, right? Here in red are the percentage of work that's been completed. The overall bar is the total time that's been allocated for the task, and that means you still have to complete the green part of the bar. So you can see there that most of the work, for instance, in step E, removing the old floor tiles, has been completed, but not entirely, right? And so it looks like that's actually a little behind schedule if the current date is indicated where it is as May 11th. So you can sort of see at a quick glance, where are you at? How long have you scheduled for specific steps in the entire project, and how's the project going? Now that's also similar to this next chart, the Pert chart. This is figure 712, 7.12 from the textbook, and you see here the same project, but now what we see here are items on the critical path. You must complete step A before you can get to B, before you can complete D. You see in green, the bold green arrow is the critical path. And notice, for instance, right, that step E, remove the old floor tiles, right, leads to step F, installing the new floor tiles, right? So you really can't do one until you do the other. And quite frankly, you can't get to step H, returning the tables and chairs, until step G is completed, reworking the old ones, right? So you can sort of see how this provides yet another layer of information when you're running a project. To be able to see, well, there's no way for me to even start scheduling labor to reinstall the tables and chairs until they're finished up with steps D and G, moving the tables and chairs into the woodworking shop and then having the rework done and completed. So you can sort of see here more information. I think working together hand in hand, a Gantt chart and a Pert chart can be very, very useful to manage larger projects. All of this, of course, as I mentioned before, driven by the master calendar, the master schedule. But as you can see here, these are tools which can be very, very useful for both large and small projects, especially the Gantt and the Pert chart, both of which I've used previously in my career. The Gantt chart more than the Pert chart, but the whole concept of being able to manage more around and based upon the critical path is a crucial component of basic project scheduling. So this is another aspect of production, of operations to consider. How will you schedule the flow of work and processes in order to be the most effective and efficient in delivering products and services to the marketplace where you need to deliver them? More tools, more considerations. I hope this is helpful. We'll see you in the next lecture.